the sonatas that we have been recording here are products of Mozart's 19th year, which means that they are products of Mozart's maturity, because by the time Mozart is writing these sonatas, he's got a good 200 pieces under his belt. So these pieces of a 19-year-old are remarkably sophisticated, highly mercurial products of a man whose music shows all of the symptoms of attention deficiency disorder. It's unpredictable, and as a result, an instrument which is volatile, which has a light speaking voice, which has a sound which dies rapidly, but has an extraordinary vivacity. That's the reason why this kind of instrument represents Mozart's music in an ideal sort of way. I'm recording these Mozart sonatas on a so-called forte piano, a piano of the late 18th century, the kind of piano that Mozart knew and played and in fact describes in great detail in a letter to his father when he goes and visits Johann Andreas Stein, the maker of this piano. If we have a look at it, we can see certain things about it that are quite different from the modern piano with which we will soon compare it. It looks a bit like a harpsichord. It has a much narrower case, and there's no big cast iron metal plate that is putting the strings under huge amounts of tension. The strings are rather thin, and I think what is very striking is that they are parallel, all of these strings, to one another, which is quite different from the modern piano, as we'll see. Another thing that we can notice if we look very, very carefully at the soundboard, which is the board which is underneath the strings, is that if we look at the grain, we'll see that the grain is moving absolutely parallel to the strings. What this means is actually that the best sound comes out of the tail of the instrument. Now, one of the facts about not having overstrung instruments but parallel strings is that the bass strings are longer, and because they're longer and they're under less tension, they are thinner and in fact clearer. That's the lowest note on the piano. You'll notice it has a slight growl, but it's very, very clear. The beginning of the Beethoven-Waldstein Sonata here is very, very much more precise and clear than it will be on an instrument of today. The speed of this action is so much greater than those of modern pianos for reasons that we'll see when we look at the action side by side. But just to film very close into the strings when I play notes, you will notice how unbelievably fast the hammer comes up and plays. So fast, in fact, that the hammer jumps at the string and comes back, and you can barely even see the moment of impact. That's the secret of the Viennese mechanism, the Viennese action. Now I'm sitting here in front of a Hamburg Steinway D, a concert grand that's found in concert halls all over the world. And I think the first thing that we notice about it is this large cast iron gilded frame. This is the critical ingredient that subjects the strings to tons of tension. If you're playing the Tchaikovsky B-flat minor concerto, this sound is absolutely glorious. It's voluminous and it's concentrated. But when the strings are crossed, one of the things that happens is that you can either play both hands at the same power, or you can bring out the melody, as every young child learns to do at the piano, and suppress the left hand, or else the left hand will sound too loud. If I play a Bach invention on this instrument with both hands equal, most people will say the left hand is simply too loud. If I do that on an instrument like this, where the stringing is parallel, we hear an absolutely natural balance. Well, here we have the side-by-side comparison. We have the Johann Andreas Stein action here on my left and your right, and then on the other side, this brilliant action of a modern Steinway D. First of all, of course, one can see immediately that this is a much wider action. That's because we have here a 7 1/4 octave range, and over here we have only exactly 5. Now here we are in the Steinway, and just a look at the front of this remarkable action suggests already the increased complexity of how the action works. On the Viennese action that we see here, we can see what a simple piece of machinery this really is. The larger the hammers, the heavier they are. This means that the weight, in order to create a sense of balance between the key in the front and the hammers in the back, needs compensation. And that compensation is provided for by lead weights which are put into the key. And we can see here that there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Clearly, the general speed of your performance is going to slow. So your whole approach to playing an instrument like this will mean that the mercurial style of Mozart is harder to achieve on an instrument like this. When we start to play Mozart, we will see that the much thicker hammers are, in fact, creating a massive sound which is less focused. So here is the opening of the same sonata that I performed on the Stein copy. And perhaps the most vivid way of focusing is the ending, and in specific this bass. The Mozart is very rambunctious. On this instrument, it sounds very resonant, very, very beautiful. If I switch over to this instrument and play that ending, keeping in mind the tuning is a little different here, the vividness of that instrument, because of the smaller tension and the faster striking of the hammers, creates quite a different impression. So the evolution of music in the 19th century went more towards melody and power, and this instrument does that splendidly. But each one of these is a brilliant invention, a brilliant solution to represent the artistic ideals of a particular time.